DOM tree and all. Yes. Okay. So let's start our discussion. Okay. So FYI, formally, technically from today we are going to continue your dev part, right? And we are starting with the front end. So before we reach to React, you need to know a lot of concepts around DOM manipulation in order to understand eventually things in React properly, right? So and a lot of your interviews will be also dependent on this these concepts. So it's going to be extremely important for you guys to understand. Make sense, everyone? Okay. Now, we know the fact that using JavaScript, we are able to do a lot of things. And one of the most fundamental use case of JavaScript is of manipulation of DOM. One of the most fundamental use case of JavaScript is to be able to manipulate and control DOM. And what is DOM? DOM is your document object model. Okay, this is kind of like the most fundamental use case of JavaScript. Of course, with JavaScript you can do a lot more. You can write server-side code, you can write mobile-oriented code, a lot of things you can do. But if you see like from very early stages, like if you see very legacy code bases, there the fundamental use case of JavaScript has been DOM manipulation. Right now, what do I mean? What do I actually refer with the fact when I say manipulation and control of DOM? Right. So a question that can come to your mind is, what is the meaning of the word DOM manipulation? Okay, when we say manipulating the DOM, we mean that using JavaScript, we should be able to control what is, or I should say, what elements are being added to the DOM, how they behave, how they behave in terms of user interaction, how their look and feel is, and everything else related to these HTML elements. Okay, so when we say the fact that we want to manipulate the DOM, we actually mean the fact that we should be able to control what is being added to the DOM, what is being removed from the DOM. So we should say added slash removed to the DOM, how they behave, how whatever elements you are adding, how these elements behave in terms of user interaction, that when the user interacts with those elements, how they actually behave, how their look and feel is. Everything should be controllable by JavaScript. And if you remember, that's one of the most fundamental, like this is at least one of the most important use cases of JavaScript, that using JavaScript you are able to add user interaction to your web pages. Isn't that the case? That the most important interaction, the user interaction, you're able to add to your web pages using JavaScript, right? And that's what we want here, and that's what we technically want here. Okay, so this is what the meaning of DOM manipulation. This is what meaning of DOM manipulation is. Now, a question can come to your mind is how to achieve DOM manipulation. How can you achieve DOM manipulation? In order to achieve DOM manipulation, one of the most fundamental things that you can actually do is use a lot of functions provided to you by the browser. So our browsers provide us a lot of functions and objects using which we can control the whole DOM. Okay, so important thing to note is that these functions are not native to JavaScript. Instead they are provided by the browser, right, which is the runtime environment. Okay, so whatever functions we are going to discuss, these functions and objects are not part of your native JavaScript. They are actually provided to you by the browser, right? So browser is actually providing you with the help of JavaScript all of these functions. They are not the native JS functions altogether. They are not like have been always the part of the ECMA script document specification altogether. That's not the case, right? So this is something that we have to keep in mind. Some of the most important functions are some of these functions that we have to one by one take care about is something like document.get element by ID. Okay, document.get element by elements by class name, document.query selector, right, and so on, like query selector and document.get elements by tag name, etc. And okay, so there are a lot of functions that we will one by one see, but these are kind of like the functions that are going to enable us to control everything around the DOM. Okay, these are everything around the DOM. Okay, this is something that you have to keep in mind, and that's what we are going to start with, right? And in order to learn all of this, what we're going to do is we're going to try to make a small application, right? While building that application, there will be a lot of things that we will be able to see and understand, and then we will see how the overall interaction is actually working. Vansh is asking what is document object model. Vansh, कितनी क्लास मिस करी है? लास्ट वाली करिए बस, तो बस लास्ट वाली देख के आएंगे, बस वही देखना था, और बहुत लंबा डिस्कशन हुआ था इस पे, वो रिपीट करना मुश्किल है. ठीक है, चलो कूल है. अच्छा, हाउ मेनी गाइस हैव सीन दिस एप्लीकेशन टियर लिस्ट? ये वाले मीन्स देखे होंगे कई लोगों ने. टियर लिस्ट क्रिएटर, दिस वन टियर मेकर. ये वाली एप्लीकेशन देखी तुमने, ये ऐसे टियर लिस्ट बंदे हुए, कितने लोगों ने देखी? नहीं देखी? ओके, सो चलो मैं तुम्हें समझाता हूँ कि ये क्या एप्लीकेशन. So there's this very interesting application called as tier list maker. Okay, there are a lot of famous memes around this application as well. Right, it's a very simple application. You make a couple of lists. For example, you can see there's a list S, A, B, C, D, F. There are a lot of lists altogether, and then there will be a couple of elements. For example, you can see there are a lot of image-based elements here, and then you can take an element and move it to a particular list. Then you can take an element, move it to a particular list. You can take an element, move it to a particular list, and so on. Okay, you can see something like this. Right, these kind of lists you can technically prepare. Okay, and you can actually see there are a lot of tier lists altogether. For example, let me actually show you. Right. You can see, let's see if there is any famous ones. Let's see, famous tier lists, tier maker. Okay. Okay, so you can see there are, for example, there is this tier list of MCU heroes, okay, which you can technically rank like from the top to bottom kind of stuff. Okay, for example, this one is slightly even better. Okay, the boss, great, good. Okay, so you can see this is the kind of tier list that is technically present, right? So like what happens in a tier list is that, let's say you say strongest, strong, okay, then you can say not much, are they heroes, and who are they, something like this. Okay, so we make kind of like each individual list, and then what you can do is you can move one hero, you can move a particular hero from this list to from this part to another list. For example, let's say if I call it as strongest, and this one as stronger, this one as strong, okay, are they heroes, and then let's say who are they. Okay, let's say this is our list. This is our technical list. So we can delete a particular row as well. You can see you can delete a particular row, and then you can move your heroes like into the list, kind of like drag and drop kind of a scenario you can do. So we'll keep Thor as the strongest, then Doctor Strange let's say as the strongest. Mantis we will say are they, or let's say who are they. Then Captain Marvel are the heroes. Then Ant-Man are the heroes. Hulk we will keep in the strongest. Black Panther we will keep in stronger. Iron Man we will keep in the strongest. Groot we will keep in are the heroes. Gamora we will keep who are they. This one will keep who are they. Falcon will keep, let's say something like this. Captain America as stronger. Bucky Barnes as strong. Black Widow are the heroes. This one as are the heroes, and so on. Right? You can keep on changing stuff. Spider-Man we can keep as strongest, and this as strong, and so on. Yeah, something like this. And this is what tier list is. That you technically create a list, kind of like a list is a bucket, and then you put those elements in the bucket in an interactive way. That your elements can be moved from one list to another list, and it's a drag and drop scenario. And just FYI, there are a lot of memes that have been made using this particular application altogether. A hell lot of memes are there, and this application became quite famous recently. So in order to understand our concepts of DOM manipulation, we are going to use this. Okay, we are going to kind of like try to prepare something similar to a tier list, so that we can make our own tiers and we can use it however we want, whenever we want. That's the agenda that we are going to have. Okay, so in order to understand DOM manipulation, we will learn by building a small tier maker app. Okay, similar to this one. I'll just put the image here. Okay, and can you bring it back? Okay. Can we bring them back? Okay, I don't think we can bring them back. Let's go back, and let's see if we have some other image to add. Okay, so I'll just take this image and put it out here. Okay, so this kind of a tier list we are going to make. And what should be the features? What features do we expect? So one should be able to create a tier bucket and name it. Name of the bucket should be editable. Okay, then one should be able to add elements which can be dragged and dropped in these buckets. We should be able to move an element from one bucket to another bucket, and maybe double clicking on the element should bring them out of any bucket. Double clicking on any element should bring them out of any bucket. And for images, we don't want an image uploader because we are not setting up any backend altogether. Every element will be having an image. So to add an element, we need to provide URL of the image directly in a form. Okay, so what we can have is we can have a form, and inside that form we can expect the URL of a particular image, and then if we say add, then that image should be used as the image for the corresponding element, and then we should be able to move the elements altogether. This is kind of like the expectation. That we want to have, and with this particular application only, we will start, I would say, learning our concepts of DOM. Okay, we're not going to too much focus on the CSS part. I will definitely put in some basic CSS altogether. Don't worry on that particular front. But CSS we will be able to like you can say we can manipulate. CSS is not the focus as such, to be very honest. But yeah, how this drag and drop features can be added, how more lists can be added, how new elements can be added, that's going to be a lot fun to actually do, right? So main focus should be on DOM manipulation altogether. Now let's start. I'll just close this one here now because we have the reference image with us, right? That we want to have. Okay. So let's start. First of all, I'll just prepare a simple infrastructure. So I'll say tier list. Save it, and then I will say let's have an H1. Your own tier list app. Yeah. Save it. Okay. Cool. Now, how the tier list should technically work? Is that, let's say, there should be first of all a form. Inside that form, there should be some mechanism using which we should be able to create this bucket list. So this is what I'm calling as a bucket. This strongest, stronger, strong. This is what I'm calling as a bucket. Okay. So there should be technically a form inside which we should be able to create these buckets. But how that form is going to interact and all of that stuff is something that we have to think about. Okay. But first of all, let's prepare a form. So I'll say a form. Inside this form, I'll be having let's say a label. Okay. And we do not need this much part. We do not need description and name and everything. Okay, let's say something like this. We will get a tier name. Let's say we'll get a tier name, and let's put a placeholder here. Right? Give the tier name. Okay, and now you can see I have a label. You can see this tier is the label. The moment I click on this label, there's a focus coming up, right? And there's an input tag. Inside this input tag, I've kept the type as text. I've kept the ID as tier, name as tier, and placeholder as give the tier name. And then there is an input of type submit with the value submitted. Okay, a very basic form we technically are having. Okay, now. From here only, our journey of DOM manipulation is going to start. Now, the first and the foremost thing that we have to do is, we have to start integrating JavaScript inside our HTML, right? As of now, you might not have, probably you may have, but probably you might not have interacted with JavaScript inside HTML. You might have never inserted any JavaScript inside your HTML. How can you do that? So again, there are two ways to insert JavaScript in your HTML pages. One way is again kind of like very similar to internal CSS, where you have a style tag. Similar to a style tag, you have a script tag. You have a script tag that you can put at the very end, right? You can put at the very end before the body. Okay. And here, if I say console.log hello, save it. And if I go on inspect, let's put it here, console. Can you see? If I refresh the page, can you see a hello is coming up? The remaining part is, you can just avoid, this is because of the browser, but you can see this hello is technically coming up, right? What does this mean? This means that this script tag is loading JavaScript properly, right? This is one way to insert JavaScript, okay? So let's start talking about it. So the first thing should be how to add JavaScript in your HTML pages. So there are mainly two ways to insert JS in our HTML pages. One way is to use the script tag at the end of the body and write all the JavaScript there. Okay. The other way is to have a separate JavaScript file and then link it to the HTML page and link it to the HTML page using script tag. Okay. So this is the first one. This is the first one that I've shown you here. That I've added a script tag and I've started writing directly the JavaScript here. And like however amount of JavaScript you want to write, you can actually write. Hello world, save it, and you can see hello world is now getting printed all together. So this is kind of a code implementation you can have. Okay. Okay, this kind of a code implementation you can have. But what is the problem with this particular code implementation? You guys can automatically see yourself as well. That there's a very fundamental issue. If I keep adding elements like this, there's a very fundamental issue. The fundamental issue here is that it's not going to be clean. Like the overall management of the overall page is going to be very hard for us. Why is that? Because of course most of the HTML pages are not having like 10, 11 lines of code. They got hundreds of lines of code. In those hundreds of lines of code, if you start integrating JavaScript also, then it can technically become a problem. Okay, so we can say that adding JavaScript directly in the HTML page can lead to less readability of the code, right? Hence, this is not always preferred in production code basis. Okay, this is not going to be preferable because otherwise we won't be able to like distinguish a lot. We won't be able to see how exactly the HTML is working, how exactly the JavaScript is working, because there will be too much code, and handling too much code is not easy for everybody. At all. Okay, that's where the second I would say approach comes into picture. In the second approach, what you can do is you can make a new file, script.js, for example. You can say console.log hi, and instead of writing script tag like this, we will say script, and then inside the script tag, instead of writing any JavaScript, you can give a source attribute. Inside the source attribute, you can give the path of the file script.js, and the moment I save it, you can see now hi is getting printed. This is something that we will rely on, and now everything can be moved to a new file altogether. Okay, so I'll just copy this code again, and we will put it here. Okay, and instead of doing something like this, we do not want any hello world or anything. We can give a source attribute, and inside the source attribute, you can pass a string, and you can say script.js. Okay, so the script tag has got a source attribute that can help us to link a JavaScript file to our HTML page. This is something that you have to keep in mind, and this will be the approach that we will try to rely on, because this looks more readable, this is more segregated, and you will be able to handle things well in case you have a lot of code to do. Make sense, everybody? Is this point making sense? Yeah, yes or no in the chat. Till now, is everything making sense? Pretty simple, pretty crystal clear. Nothing too much. So now the first concept we know that how you can integrate a JavaScript file in your HTML page. Okay. Yes, this is the first class for dev. Last class में हमने थोड़ा DOM पे introduction start कर दिया था second half में, but kind of like first formal class on dev. मतलब dev में पहले HTML CSS हो चुका है, FYI. HTML CSS basic JavaScript पहले हो चुकी है. अब हम लोग DOM manipulation और React वाला part start करते हैं. So keep that in mind. Any questions? Any questions, anybody? I would like to pause myself here and see if you guys have any questions. I'll talk about which has priority. Like, to be honest, there is not going to be much of priority because if you sequentially give your scripts, then they will be sequentially executed. How you should use them in terms of performance, I can talk about later. So guys, this part, that where exactly, what are the different places where